the next question was, I started looking and I realized that serum uric acid levels had been increasing progressively in our population over the last 100 years. And when back 100 years ago, when blood pressure was not so high, uric acid levels were like 3 or 4 in the average person. And today they're like 5 or 6. And some people have levels of 7, 8, 9, 10, and they get gout, but there's also a very high association with hypertension. So then I said, oh gosh, the uric acid's going up in our population. It's probably related to diet. What in the diet could raise uric acid? And everyone was saying, well, you know, it's purines. And purines are these nitrogen containing substances that are like in beer and in meats but meat intake really hadn't increased during this time, and beer had gone up a little bit, but it certainly couldn't explain hypertension. But there was another food that is associated with high uric acid, and it's sugar. And sugar is carbohydrate, but it consists of 2 sugars, actually. It's glucose and fructose bound together. And glucose and fructose are bound together. They make up sucrose or table sugar. And when you eat sugar, you start producing uric acid within minutes, 10 minutes, it's already going up in your blood. And it's not because of the glucose, it's because of the fructose. And so I said, okay, I got it. We're going to give sugar to an animal and we're going to see if it raises its blood pressure. And so we gave sugar to some rats and their blood pressure went up, and we lowered their uric acid and their blood pressure came down. Everything looked great. But there was one other thing that happened. When we lowered the uric acid, the animals also, even though they were eating the same amount, they didn't get as fat. And the triglycerides in their blood didn't go up so much. And their fatty liver was less. And everything was better. They were more insulin sensitive. I go, what? Could uric acid actually be playing a role in obesity and metabolic syndrome? I can't believe it. And yet, as we started continuing to study this, and we studied in great detail, we actually identified that this was the major mechanism by which sugar causes hypertension, as well as obesity, as well as metabolic syndrome. And then we had this big discovery that fructose was not only from the sugar we eat, from the high fructose corn syrup we eat, but that our body can make fructose. And when we're eating bread and rice, our body makes fructose, and that makes uric acid, and that triggers all these events. And then we started realizing that we identified an absolutely major pathway for what causes obesity. And then, it goes on from there. But basically, I was a kidney doctor following my own curiosity, trying to figure out what was causing high blood pressure. And it took me to kidney damage and took me to uric acid, then took me to sugar. And then suddenly I realized it was a much bigger story than I'd ever had anticipated. And for the last 25 years, I've been studying sugar and fructose, and I'm kind of an expert on it. I've probably published 200 papers on this topic. And so that's why I wrote this book, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat, because it turns out that this is a very major pathway that animals use in the wild to get fat before they hibernate. And birds use it to get fat before they migrate. It's like a mechanism for causing obesity.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So that's the story. And it turns out it's even bigger because we now have linked it with how it can drive cancer and dementia and alcoholism. And I'm funded by the National Institute of Health to study these diseases and how fructose can be involved in it. So it's kind of like unraveling a big story, and it also helps to explain the various diets. It can explain why low carb diets work, and why protein leverage, high protein diets are beneficial. There's a lot of benefits a lot of things that this pathway can explain. So it's